Oh, it's good to see so many close family and close friends. And I can't help thinking that Ina would want to be here because it was all about family and close friends to Ina. So I'm hoping in some way she is, here. We all loved Ina for who she was to each of us. And I've been thinking a lot about who she was to me and who she was as a person, and I want to share some of that with you. Ina's life was so much more than this eulogy could ever be. It's my small offering on the path her life took and my memories of her as one sister for another, and I have my Kleenex. I prepared a eulogy, but I was not planning on having to do a eulogy. So if I need to stop for this, please bear with me. I think the first place to start, though, and I think Mum would agree, is that we first have to thank your sister, Mum, Auntie Jean, for putting the idea into your head and Dad's head to try for a girl. And you already had Greg and Rob, and although there isn't too much terribly wrong with either of them, most of the time, we will always be grateful to your sister, Auntie Jean, for her part in bringing our sister into the world, your first baby girl. And I believe your only planned child, I think. She was born Ina Catherine Edith Lee on March 11th, 1954, in London, not so very far from here at all. We were a military family, and we moved around a lot, so my recollections of her weren't that great until I knew she was my big sister. I knew she was there in England with me, walking to school and holding my hand when I didn't like eating rice pudding. And it wasn't until my first recollections, if I do a chronology of her life, don't really come until high school, when she was much older than me, those years when you're a teen and you're only 13 and your sister's 16, worlds apart. But I remember her in high school, and she did activities that I didn't do. She did cheerleading, and she did gymnastics, and she excelled because of her drama on the floor routine, where she could express herself on the floor. And I remember watching her and being so nervous. She was on the uneven bars because the bars squeaked, and it was just so quiet. They didn't have music back then. But she did very well in both those. And she had a very good art teacher, Miss Tipping, and I happened to have the same art teacher after that. So I knew what kind of teacher she was. She was very serious, and she could point out the students who had talent, and she pointed that out to Ina. And I think that's one of the reasons why Ina went into fine arts. She graduated in art history and art studio at the University of Toronto in 1977. And her first job, soon after that, was in Sarnia, in her field. She was, looking back, she said, I think that was my best job at the Sarnia Public Library and Art Gallery. She was the assistant curator there. And she painted there, of course, and she was always painting. But, I visited her. I was in London at the time, and she was in Sarnia. And she was never labeled the one who could cook in our family. That's Barb. But I remember her sandwich that I had there. It was, she said, take an English muffin and egg and tuna, and you mix it up, and you add a tomato and cheese, and it was on an English muffin. It was delicious. I always remember that sandwich for mine. And John Evans also said, he phoned, he was a former husband of Ina's, and he said, one of the many delights, and he was British, one of the many delights of living with your sister was her lemon mousse. So she could cook, she really could. I don't think she wanted to stay in Sarnia. She felt it was small. She followed Greg out to BC shortly after. I think she was a few years in Sarnia. And she got another job in her art field at the Vancouver Art Gallery in the extension department, touring the province. She had never been to BC, but she toured in a van full of paintings to different communities that didn't have their own gallery. And she was often alone in this van, and traveling all over the place, and really not undaunted by the task at all, because she was doing what she loved to do, talk about art and show art to people who weren't otherwise exposed to it. And I remember driving to her talk in Nelson. I think she went to Nelson or Castlegar, and I arrived late, and she was already talking to this group of people, and I didn't have a chance to see much except quickly sit down quietly. And she was lecturing, and she was looking at a painting on a slide projector, and she said, something to the effect, "Do you see the warmth of that color in the painting?" And this fellow kind of shouted out, yeah, I see that color. I see that, yeah. And I looked around, and it was a room full of mentally challenged people. But based on the way Ina was presenting, you'd think it was to her peers, or, she was just so involved in the art, and some of them were snoring, and some of them were sleeping, and I just remember that image of being so funny, because she was so much the artist and the speaker in front of this group. And she, while she was touring, she met a really good friend, Sonia Cornwall, who was an older lady. She was a fellow artist up in the Kootenays at Jones Lake Ranch, and she made it a point of, although there were many years between them, she made it a point to go up and visit her often, because she was a fellow artist, and she didn't have too many fellow artists in our family really to talk to about art. She just, you don't know, you don't know what you're talking about, or but she would share her love with people like Sonia Cornwall, and she went up. That was one of the shows she did as a tribute to Sonia Cornwall. Was she had about 13 paintings of the Jones Lake Ranch area where Sonia was with her husband, who was a cattle rancher, and it was a very special friend, I know, to Ina. She was. Ina had to go back to school. Actually, there was one more position she had before she went back to school in Qualicum Beach. She was eclectic in so many ways, and in her